for one, the coalition of people of color says that Slavic people are people of color. So blonde hair, blue-eyed white men are people of color, which is completely inconsistent. There was one instance where they said, in order to be inclusive of all women, we now must spell women with an X instead of an E, Wimixin. And then what happened was another faction immediately came out and said, that's exclusionary to trans women because trans women are women, therefore you're offensive. And another group said we're spelling with a Y because man. So there's the one thing I find among the left is a complete lack of moral consistency and a rapid shift in what their morals are supposed to be.
Well, that standpoint is epistemology, which is you see the world from different perspectives, and your reality is different depending upon the perspective, where you sit in, you know, the intersections of various cultures.
I don't see any moral framework among the left.
Well, the moral framework is radical skepticism. It's just taking, you know, it's taking what we got essentially from Plato, which is you can't know what's really in front of you, which was perpetuated by Kant and what most people believe, and it's just putting it in practice. You know, there is no set reality. There's only your perception, your assessment of that, which sort of makes it up. So that's their consistency is in that primacy of consciousness, radical skepticism framework. Whereas, you know, some on the right buy that, some on the right like objective reality, some on the right are, you know, they're all over the spectrum.
But it's completely contradictory to what they do. So if the corporate press comes out and says what 2 + 2 = 5, they all immediately agree.
Right,
so it's paradoxical.
But yeah, you're right. But to them, it's paradox and change are the realities. For them, logic is the means by which you exercise out paradoxes. If there's a paradox, you know something is wrong in your reasoning, and you have to sort it out. You have to get rid of contradictions. They don't care about those contradictions.
The existence of the contradiction is their moral framework, essentially. That.
It's something that it's something they're pleased not to try to sort out for themselves.
I think the 2 + 2 = 5 thing that they've pushed so heavily is a good example of what you're saying, that skepticism, you can't know, that not everything is, but at the same time, the fact that there appears to be a logical inconsistency is exactly their worldview.
Well, but also it has an enormous power, those kinds of strange statements. And the power that it has is to undermine your confidence in reality.
Yeah.
And you're right. And to the extent that you cede any moral ground to them at all, you're undermining your own confidence in reality. And that's what they want, because when you don't have confidence in reality, they can tell you what to do.
Right. They can tell you you're actually mistaken, you're making a mistake, trust me instead.
And they use pressure and violence and the threat of violence and the threat of exclusion to press their point home and to intimidate people into silence.
So I do think it's fascinating that the two books, it's probably the most, what's the right way to say it? It's the most obvious, right? You were given The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged and you went, wow. And those are the books, I guess, right? If someone was going to make a guess before the show what books you read that made you think this, it'd probably be those books.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, The Fountainhead is I think the better book, artistically speaking, but it's about an artist and it's about artistic integrity. It's about rational egoism and what that means. What does selfishness mean? If you want to know what selfishness means, and you don't want to go through objectivist epistemology, which can be a drudgery, like any kind of philosophy, then read The Fountainhead, and you'll see an example in the hero of what rational egoism actually is.
Have you ever played BioShock?
Yes, and it's disturbing because it's clearly it's clearly anti. Yeah, it takes every stereotype of objectivism or Rand's philosophy in narrative form and reverses it on its head.
Yeah, like the worst possible interpretations.
Like a Nietzschean, like it's more Nietzschean. You know,
it's such a good game though.
It's a pretty good game. yeah, but it definitely takes the worst interpretation of her work and created a pretty interesting narrative to it, and that's part of...
You fight Atlas.
Yeah, I never got that far. I never got that far because the narrative was so bad. It was so obviously, it was didactic. But, you know, I mean, we have to do things like that. We have to make games like that where you're getting that little piece of indoctrination, but good indoctrination.
No, I agree. One of the things I like to talk about is Harry Potter being so incredibly popular among millennials. It's like the only cultural reference they have. Everything, Trump is Voldemort, everyone's Voldemort. But, I mean, it's the most unoriginal story, to be completely honest. Now, the universe building that J.K. Rowling did with Harry Potter is fantastic, witches, wizards, and all that. But really, all she did was write about Hitler. It's like Voldemort is magic Hitler who wants pure-blooded wizards. We get it, we get it. And then what has she done for all of the... So now Harry Potter finishes with book 7. They do Secret Fantastic Beasts. And what do? It's another magic Hitler, Grindelwald. He's also Hitler. And like, it's the only idea she has in her mind. And so my thought was, I would love, maybe she'll consider doing it now that she's under fire from the left over the trans issue. My view of the next very obvious cultural reference you could make would be the Soviet Union, Stalin, and communism, in that the story writes itself. The bad guy in the next arc for Harry Potter is someone who thinks magic puts people above other people and that wizards and muggles are all human, so they should be equal, and then seeks to suppress the use of magic. You end up with a Stalin-esque figure as opposed to another Hitler that she's written like 4 versions of.
I like that. I like that. If you
explore the idea, and
if you watch the History Channel at all, you'll see that they have almost an infinite number of Hitler episodes and almost nothing of Stalin.
I think
it bothers me.
Or Mao. And the Mao stuff so crazy. The pig iron, the destroy all your tools.
Yeah, guys,
kill the sparrows.
We know Hitler was evil, okay, but so were Stalin and Mao. So can we also teach kids that?
Yeah. Trying to explain to them what a struggle session was now in the day and age now where that's becoming almost commonplace on the internet.
Didn't Mao have everybody go out and kill the sparrows or something like that? What was that story?
That I don't know, but
they were like,
it sounds it.
And then the bug population exploded and created a famine. There's just a whole bunch of really stupid things these people do when they hyper-centralize power. And so ultimately where I end up falling more on the capitalism side is that capitalism is a decentralized economic system, whereas communism, of course, is a command centralized economy.
Right.
And these people are trying to wager that the individual, them, as one person is smarter than the entire decentralized network of human thought, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
It's impossible.
Absolutely impossible.
It's impossible for any one person to understand the transactions of any 50 or 100 people, let alone 350 million or 7 billion people. You need to leave that to them.
Right.
And that's the great thing about capitalism that I always focus on. I don't focus on it as a system of capital or private ownership. I focus on it as the only system, the only liberal system there is. It's about choice. It's about self-sovereignty. Two of the most important moral innovations of all time.
Going back to your point about what was it called, the primacy of
consciousness or primacy of existence.
This is a really good point when you think about their economic views on resources and things like this. So I'll give you a couple examples. I was arguing with the Great British Socialist Party or whatever on Twitter, and they were arguing that
I'm sorry, by the way.
But it's fun. It's fun. I'm not being mean to them, or they're mean to me. We're like exchanging ideas in a rather like hoity-toity kind of way, but it was like a good exchange. And I said, the system doesn't work because the allocation of resources doesn't make sense. An individual who wants to be a musician, for instance, everybody would be playing guitar. If they said, everybody just pick your job and do whatever you want, then people are going to be like, I always want to be a musician. The problem is they're not good at it. And so I always tell people, how many people do you know play music? And they're like, oh, a bunch. How many of them want to be professional musicians? Oh man, half of them. And how many of them are good enough to do it? And they're like, none of them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, now imagine if we had a communist system where in their utopian view, you could do whatever you wanted. Everybody would be playing awful music and nobody would be making bread. So I tell the Socialist Party that, and they responded with, that's absurd. They disagree. And so I presented a scenario. I said, okay, let's say someone's a carpenter, but they really like building cars on the side. And then, they want to fix up an old 1969 Mustang or something. How would they do that in a communist system where their job is ascribed to them based on their skills, according to their skills, and what they get is according to their needs? And they were like, what do you mean? They would just go down and get whatever they wanted. And I'm like, no, like somebody whose job is to fix plumbing really also wants to try and invent a new kind of car or something. Do they go to the government and say, here are the parts that I need? Wouldn't the government say, you don't need those and your skills don't apply to those? In a capitalist system, There's a guy who is a janitor who comes up with a really great idea for a food product and makes it, presents it to the company, and they say, this is brilliant, congratulations, this is your job now. You're able to find the diamond in the rough and craft it. Capitalism allows for this, communism doesn't. Communism would say, we're not going to, so I'll slow down. The guy who invented Flamin' Hot Cheetos, I think he was a janitor.
Yeah.
He worked at Frito-Lay.
Yeah, he was.
Thank you.
Yep.
And yeah, and it's their most popular product. The company said, anybody who works here, feel free to submit your ideas. And so what he would do is he would take the dry Cheeto pieces and put chili lime stuff on it, like the Mexican candy. And then he brought it to them and they said, this is delicious. Let's go with it. In a communist system, you can't do that. The communists are going to be like, we're not going to give you the things you need to experiment. These are not according to your skills or needs. The Great British Socialist Party told me that in a socialist system, anyone at any time for any reason could go down to the government and acquire whatever they wanted. And I just said, you realize resources are finite, right? They're not just going to give something. In a capitalist system, you have access to it, but you still have to allocate the resources yourself. You still have to trade something of value so that you can then make the choice to trade the value you've produced for the value you want to,
And the price of that resource tells you exactly how much work you need to put in to get it. So, yeah, I mean, right now we're talking about economic systems that are reflecting a primacy of consciousness, which is Marxism, or a primacy of existence, which is capitalism.
And that's why I wanted to bring it up. Maybe it was a bit convoluted, but the point was, in their mind, things just exist if they want them to.
That's it. That's true.
And so they're like, I can have whatever I want. So my favorite meme is some leftist tweeted, what are you going to do once communism wins? And a person responded, he said something like, teach people to grow vegetables on my farm and do, book readings. And then someone else responded, your farm. Like but it's a great point. It's funny.
Yes.
They think when the economy is completely under control of a centralized authority, they will have things.
Yeah.